Rodney Bingenheimer was the big MC.
Let's welcome, if you will, from Pasadena, ladies and gentlemen, Van Halen!
It was like the first all-original set we ever did as a band, and it was like, this place was like 1,500 to 2,000 people. People loved it, and Rodney Bingenheimer really liked us, and kind of got our foot into the Starwood. We played there, and eventually led to the Whiskey.
Everybody wants to play the Whiskey, even today. I get so many calls on groups want to come in there. Hey, you put them in, but you never know. Out of that one, you might catch, somebody might catch a good one. But then a lot of times they get very, very popular.
I was the guy who promoted all the shows at the Whiskey, so I would get different bands I liked or I saw activity on. People liked the band, so I put them on, period.
Once they started doing the clubs, it really became more about them, more of a showcase band, not a cover band. And, the songs they were playing were true Van Halen.
Van Halen were real. They believed in their fans, they believed in themselves.
They practiced every day, and then they worked 4 nights a week at the clubs. No turning back.
We all start off looking for love, attention, to achieve in music, make a contribution, make $1 million. These are all great and honorable things. They're great. While you're working for them, you have to set your own goals to work your ass off all the time, every time.
They used to rehearse in Dave's basement. Dave's basement was probably a room that was about 12 feet in width by about 25 feet in length.
These are the steps leading down from, this is Dave's house back here, where he grew up with his father. Underneath here is the famous basement where Van Halen put their whole tour together. Dr. Roth was very nice to let the guys go down there and really perfect, what they were going to take out on the road.
I remember they wrote a couple new ones and invited me to the basement, which is rare because nobody was really allowed in there while they were practicing. So I sat on the floor and they played Little Dreamer. Yeah, you gotta hear this. And I remember saying Little Dreamer, it's okay, it sounds like something else. I remember like being real blasé about it, but really I thought this is great, but I thought they'd listen to me more if I didn't just, froth at the mouth all the time. They're writing originals like crazy at that point, They started just writing another one, here's another one, like it was no problem. I remember they played the Civic, and we really wanted them to play all originals for like the first time. And they did, but then they did Kiss, Rock and Roll All Night. Me and my friend were, they shouldn't have done that. They should have went all the way with all originals. But that was one of their big party tunes at the time, so they threw that in. But I remember that was the first time they basically played all originals. That was a big deal.
They kept playing the Starwood and drawing more and more people. And I think mainly musicians. There were probably increasing number of girls for Dave, but they're drawing a lot of musicians, and there's a big buzz happening, and you could see more and more people showing up at every gig.
Gene Simmons discovered him at the Starwood and talked to him backstage. That was the first time they met Gene Simmons without the makeup, and they were loving it.
I was there when this happened. I remember people kind of whispering, hey, the guys in Kiss, they're up there.
I told them that I would try to get them a deal right away, and if I couldn't, that, they'd be free to do whatever they wanted. I flew them to New York, and we cut 13 things.
I just remember they went to New York and did the demo with Gene Simmons, and it was just so bitchin'. All their old songs, the very first songs that Edward had written, were etched on tape.
The first person I showed it to was my van manager, Bill Corns, but they didn't stand a chance. I couldn't get any interest, so I tore up the contract. I said, you guys are free, and here's the paper, go get yourself a deal.
I'm surprised nothing happened, really, because Kiss had a lot of clout, and Van Halen were rolling at the time, and I can't imagine why that didn't work out.
But they still came back and went right back to work. I remember one time, we were just driving around. I said, Al, what are you going to do after this? We were kids, we're living this dream. What are you going to do after? And he looked at me and he said, Greg, there's nothing after this. This is going to be my life forever. And that was kind of my realization that this is forever. They were solidly committed musicians, and that's all there is. What else do you do?
That demo eventually wound up in the hands of Marshall Burl, the nephew of famed comedian Milton Berle. Marshall would later become the band's first manager. In May of 1977, Berle brought Warner Brothers chairman Mo Austin and producer Ted Templeman to experience a Van Halen performance.
It was kind of rainy that night, and we just got up there and played. After we finished, we were upstairs. It's like, how do you do? You know, this is Mo Austin, Ted Templeman. I'm just kind of like, Warner Brothers chairman of the board. You know, the mouth drops to the floor, you know. Next thing I know, they were, you know, contract time.
And they continued to gig around town. I remember there's flyers that say last local appearance. They started putting Warner Brothers recording artists on the flyer playing the Pasadena Civic or at the Whiskey. They did a whole run. I remember again one more time over there. Then finally, it took a while for things to fall into place. Yeah. But once it did, it happened pretty quick.
Van Halen revamped the Kinks song You Really Got Me for a new generation and released it as a single before the album hit the shelves. It received some airplay nationwide and planted the seed for large-scale interest in the band. Then, on February 10th, 1978, Van Halen's self-titled debut album was released.
Van Halen one's one of the greatest landmarks of all time. I mean, it came out of the chute and it was like, oh my God.
Within months, the album had gone platinum, and Van Halen was now being heard from Pasadena to Poughkeepsie.
There were certain radio stations that wouldn't
It's
play.
impossible to imagine what it would be like to first hear that type
First
of guitar
time
playing.
running with the devil.
And all of a sudden, now the siren comes in. Like, what's this? This is good, man. This is real good. I never heard anything like this before. You have songs like Atomic Punk and Little Dreamer, and the songs on that album are just blitzkrieg, you know, right in your face attack, you know. You can't get any harder, more brutal. The lyrics are amazing. Edward's guitar playing's amazing.
We're so used to hearing throughout all the 80s and the 90s the flashy guitarists, and it's hard to imagine when only there's Bad Company and Foreigner and stuff, and then all of a sudden Eruption comes out.
The best kind of rock and roll, in my opinion, you know, is just down and dirty, you know, nasty sounding rock and roll.
They came by at a perfect time for that generation. It was the right band at the right time.
Released a record in January of 1978. And I think February they shipped us out to Chicago to join Journey and Montrose already on tour because they wanted to promote this record. We didn't come back for 11 months.
I think it was in Kentucky, I believe it was in Louisville or something. And it sounded really great, you know, and I remember everybody looking at each other like, these guys are really good, you know, like sweating over here and stuff. And I could tell that we can't allow this, you know, we can't go on after these guys or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was Montrose, and he didn't really care. So I don't know what Journey could have a problem with, really. But I seem to recall being sabotaged a couple times after that, where I couldn't get any highs, or there was something changed in the power amps backstage that I couldn't get to from the board, and I just couldn't get a good sound, and it seemed very suspicious to me. And that kind of crap goes on, unfortunately.
We toured for 6 or 8 months with this band that pulled in a lot of girls. A lot of romantic music, a lot of after-concert partying, and I think that we bit into it big time. It was fun. We were the first band to play, and once we were done and our little U-Haul truck was packed up, there was a bevy of girls waiting to party.
The other bands were well aware, like, you know, who are these guys? I mean, not just on stage, but off stage. It was like they were making their presence felt in many ways as possible.
We knew that they were going to be huge, and what's funny is that when we first met them, they knew they were going to be huge. They definitely had that attitude, that they knew. It was kind of like, you know, we're going to be millionaire rock stars in about 15 minutes, you know.
They were just kicking ass so fucking bad that I totally remember Mike telling me, hey, we're either going to be leaving this tour or we're throwing off the tour because we're smoking everybody.
After that, we went with Black Sabbath. They sent us straight away over to England.
It was a dream come true. You know, they opened for one of their idols.
I remember sitting down in front of the stereo with the needle on the record with Edward trying to get the words from Iron Man so we could play it at a backyard party. And the next thing you know, here we are opening up, and we got our gear put away very quickly when we